All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this week's Snack and Chat, Adopt for Life's weekly Facebook Live, where we explore the topics that are top of mind for families formed by adoption, kinship, and customary care. Today, my guests are Vivian McCauley and Jenn Drudge, and they're here to talk about what happens next after you've attended the ARE, the Adoption Resource Exchange, which just happened just this past weekend. For those of you that are new here, my name is Chantal, Community Engagement Liaison with Adopt for Life. Before we jump into introductions and the questions, I would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on. While we meet on a virtual platform, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we each call home. So for myself, I reside on unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory, which is also known as Ottawa. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and as a first step towards improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. So you're welcome to join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we are and can each in our own way action forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So whether you are tuning in live or maybe you're watching this later on replay, thank you for taking time to be with us. Feel free to ask your questions, put your comments in the chat below. I will take just a moment to remind you that this is a live stream on our public Facebook page. So anything you're sharing in the comments is something that's going to be publicly available. So I'll ask you just to be mindful and not include any identifiable information, names, health information, things like that when you're discussing children or minors. So with that in mind, we love to hear from you, and we hope that you find this discussion informative and engaging. So I'll introduce my guests. As clinical coordinator with Adopt Ontario, Vivian McCauley brings her social work experiences in child protection and school settings. Vivian supports adoption workers through profiling and registering children using the Adopt Ontario platform. She also provides information and guidance to prospective adoptive parents regarding the adoption process. And she believes in the importance of the well-being and happiness of young people. And this motivates her to find warm and supportive adoptive homes for every child and youth. Thank you for being here, Vivian. And I'm going to introduce you to Jenn, who is a regional parent liaison here at Adopt for Life in the Western region. Jenn is a busy parent of 6 children and teens and hails from the rural southwestern Ontario and has a background in social work. She and her husband became concurrent foster parents over 10 years ago after having 2 biological children. And since that time, they have fostered over a dozen babies and toddlers, adopted 3 older children from the public system, and adopted their youngest child through kinship care. 4 of her kids are Indigenous, Cree, Ojibwe, and Métis, and she's passionate about supporting the Indigenous community and developing an anti-racism framework in her community. Through personal experience, she is deeply acquainted with the challenges faced by families affected by FASD, developmental trauma, attachment disorder, and anxiety. After years of concurrent foster parenting, she is also keenly aware of the emotions felt by those who have experienced permanency breakdown and adoption loss. And Jenn is excited to be here and help connect other adoptive parents with the support they need. So thank you to you both so much for taking time out of your day to be on Snack and Chat with me. So welcome, welcome.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut somebody off. I'm just going to take a second just to pull up the Facebook video just to see there. Okay, so well, I'm gonna mute that. So if you're good, ladies, I'm just gonna jump into a question because there's a lot of questions that we have already And like I said in the intro, if you're watching and you have a question for Vivian or for Jen, we're also taking your questions live. So let's start, Vivian, with the recent ARE that just happened over the weekend. This, I believe, is the third virtual ARE since, well, since we all know when. So can you tell us a bit how it went and what your impressions were of the event?
Yeah, so this year's ARE went really well. The panels were very informative, educational, and we've already received a lot of EOI expression of interest submissions from families. I'm very hopeful that many of our young people presented will find adoptive families through the event. And overall, the technology worked pretty well, and many families were able to connect virtually with the children's workers. So it was great.
Good. I guess that's always a little bit of anxiety there, of whether the tech is gonna.
Yes, for sure. Biggest concern.
Yeah. Amazing. So now that we know that the event has taken place, can people still continue to access the presentations and the education resources from that ARE? Yeah.
Yeah, so the platform will be available until May 30th. And they're over the, during the ARE, there are panel discussions and those will be available. So recordings as well as additional webinars that you can check out. So feel free to go back, and you can also watch the workers' presentations of the children. So if there's any information you thought you missed, you can go back. There's lots to learn on the platform.
And I know I moderated the Adopt for Life panel that happened on Friday evening, and that for those that maybe didn't get a chance to see it, I'm not sure if that one was recorded, but it was all from adoptive parent perspective and answering questions. So I thought it gave a lot of good insight into some questions people might have. Mm-hmm. So one common question that we get a lot, which I'm sure you hear a lot too, Vivian, is how long, so the event has happened, people have submitted EOIs, expression of interest. How long do families wait? And what does that process typically look like? And if you have any advice to those families that are in that waiting period.
Yeah, so definitely I want to acknowledge that, like, I understand it can be really emotionally difficult to wait to hear from your worker after submitting that expression of interest form. And there can be many reasons why there's delays or possibilities why families may not be matched with a child that they expressed interest in. And reasons could be that maybe there were changes in the child's life or, kind of their needs. Another reason why a family might not be selected is that the child's worker might have really specific criteria that they're looking for, or the child themselves might, have kind of specific things that they want. And adoption workers are just very diligent, and they're always keeping children at the front of their mind. But with regard to the process, so once families have submitted that expression of interest form, really they should try their best to just continue to live their lives as normal and enjoy the summer, because it can take a very long time for workers to go through that expression of interest form. So we say after 60 days that you should, if you haven't heard anything, you can contact your adoption worker or private practitioner, or you can reach out to us at AdoptOntario, and we may have some insight as to whether the child has been matched, or you might have heard something. But yeah, referring to just managing time though, that waiting period, just know that, you've done what you should do, you expressed interest, and there's no further steps that you need to take. But I really encourage you though to continue to, attend any webinars or educational opportunities during that time, and just remember it can be a really slow process, just going through those expression of interest forms, contacting workers. So it's really rare that these things happen quickly.
Right. We just had a viewer also come in and say possibly too, because of the summer, there might even be, would that contribute to the slowdown because of natural slowdowns in summer, as people taking holidays and things like that?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you. So you talked a little bit right at the beginning about the sort of emotional response that awaiting parents can go through in between that waiting period. And maybe Jenn, I'm going to get you to jump into this one too, just from your lived experience. What advice would you share with parents who, so they've submitted their EOI, or even maybe they're still thinking about it, and they're now just waiting, and what they can do? And I think you touched on it too, like there's an education piece that they can do. So yeah, any suggestions and advice that you would share with those awaiting parents?
Yeah, I think there's two pieces here. So if you have not yet submitted that expression of interest, I do feel like it's a good idea to just wait a couple days before you do that. And one piece of advice I have from our entire family as a perspective is to talk to your entire support system before you submit that expression of interest, just right at the start, before you even go on that journey. In our case, it was our daughters, my parents, people that I knew were really going to need to be invested in this adoption process. And there were a couple, what I would have said would be a really good match for, our family would be a very good match for them. But maybe one of my daughters or my set of parents just expressed a lot of misgivings and a feeling of, I'm not sure about this. And we actually just then didn't submit an expression of interest. Or if we had, we contacted and went back and said, you know what, I don't think we're going to be able to continue with this. And the reason I think that is so important is because you don't want to get really far along in the process. And that's when, even further along where adoption breakdown can occur and that type of thing, you really want to make sure that and be honest about whether or not you're the right family for this child. And in that waiting period, that emotional period, I think a lot of parents are at the stage where they're almost desperate for a placement. So they've waited so long, they've done so much training, they have this dream in their mind. They're so desperate for it and they're putting their best foot forward for the workers they've come in contact with and for CAS, that they're not always honest about what their constraints are or what they can reasonably handle as a family. Or they might think, oh yeah, so perhaps this child is on the spectrum for autism or has FASD or whatever. And they think in their mind, I know, because I've been a parent who's been there, they think, well, I can handle this, and without doing a whole lot of research into it. And I think this time during this waiting period is the time to really be honest with yourself and do some investigating. Watch some webinars on the Adopt for Life platform or Adopt Ontario on FASD, if that's what's happening in a situation. Or, sometimes there's children with Down syndrome or different significant needs, and you can be doing research on that, or maybe connecting with a family, and that's what their family makeup is like. Maybe you can get together for coffee with the family, see how that family operates, and whether that is something that you truly think would be for you. So yeah, it's kind of like a waiting period, but it doesn't need to be a sitting waiting period where you're doing nothing. You definitely can be doing things. And I also wanted to mention, Vivian had said it can take quite a long time for you to hear back. Another piece of advice I would have is to definitely follow up, as Vivian suggested, because I know from several of our friends and even in our own case that there's several instances where our home study didn't get forwarded. A ball was dropped somewhere or got forwarded, and somehow the receiving agency lost it or didn't receive it. And then come to find out that the worker, in our case, we had met a lot of these workers at the ARE, and I was so disappointed that you didn't, reconnect or that you didn't follow through. And we're kind of going, well, we did. What happened? So definitely make sure that you're a bit of a squeaky wheel and advocate if you haven't heard back, because these things happen in any, human error happens, and we just need to make sure that communication is going both directions.
Right. So it's okay to reach out, but just wait for that initial 60 days to pass before reaching out and saying hi. I'm just checking. Another viewer saying, Jen, that your advice was really great. And this person remembers leaving the ARE and wanting to take all the children home with them. And it is very emotional, and taking time and thinking we're actually able to make the appropriate decisions for our family and for the waiting children. And I think that's what you're saying too, like really take the time for self-reflection, right? And be really honest with yourself. I mean, I think it was brought up too when we did the panel, like, you know, asking a doctor, what do you wish you'd known before, you know, and really, you know, taking the time to know what you can really provide, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Thank you. So next question. If a prospective parent viewed a profile of a child or a sibling group that will need specialized support, and we touched on that, I think Jen, you touched on this, but we can expand on it in this specific case, has more questions and wants to learn more, where do they go? So where would you send them?
I definitely find, so on the Adopt for Life YouTube page, there are a whole series of playlists. So particularly there's a webinars playlist on there, and there are several incredible webinars on attachment with Mary Jo Land. I think that's a really good one for you to be getting into at this stage. And also FASD, there's quite a number of good ones on there. But I also wanted to mention, because so many of the children that are looking for families do have openness in their lives. And I think at this stage, it's really good to educate yourself on the importance of openness. So there's I think it may be a snack and chat on the YouTube page that's on openness and open-heartedness.
Yes.
And yeah, I think it's just really good to familiarize yourself with that. And then, of course, the Adoption Council of Ontario, their website is phenomenal and has several amazing articles, videos that you can be watching in this kind of waiting time to learn more about some of those specialized supports that, let's be honest, for a lot of these kiddos, you're going to need that. And you need to be practical about researching on it right from the get-go. So
yeah, that was a great snack and chat with, and it was actually with Diane Mass from the ACO who did that.
Yes.
So if you're watching and you're worried, like, oh my God, how am I going to find all these links? Don't worry about it. After the snack and chat ends, the live portion ends, I'm definitely going to come back and just put all the links in for you to reach the ACO website, and then the certain webinars and YouTube channel that Jen mentioned. Vivian, is there anything specific on the ACO site that you would direct people to in this instance?
Yes. So on our online platform from the ARE, there was a webinar on openness that was really great. And there was another one that was just posted today on FASD, and it was adoptive parents speaking from their experiences, and it was very interesting. So I definitely recommend to log in and check that out as well. And as well, if there's a specific child that you're just that you saw their profile and you're curious to learn more, you can always email AdoptOntario and speak to like myself or another clinical coordinator, and we can share more information about the child and their day-to-day, and we might be able to answer some questions that's specific to that child.
Okay. Perfect. Now, I think there is a section on the ACO website that has a specific like specialized support section where people can go and sort of research and educate depending on the profile that they've seen. And that's on the Adopt Ontario website, or is that part of the ARE platform?
Just in terms of like specialized supports?
Yes.
So not on the so on the online platform for the ARE, there's like educational webinars, and
yes.
then on our website there are there's some information you can read about openness, like kind of like short articles, and then on the Adoption Council of Ontario website you can access lots of different recorded webinars, articles. So I would go to the Adoption Council Ontario for some more education.
Okay. Okay, thanks for clearing that up. And I'll post all the separate links too. Yeah, Jen.
Sorry, I was going to pipe in here as well. In terms of, I think it's very important also for you to look, so whatever the specialized needs might be of this child, try to look into your local area, what is available. So yes, there's lots of online supports, but I know many of us live in rural areas. So for example, I did not realize before we adopted our children, 3 of whom have FASD, that there is no FASD worker in our area. And we actually did finally get one 2 years ago, but I didn't know that. You may want to find out if there are those supports in your area. We have friends who their child has significant speech and language needs. And again, not realizing that it would have to be about an 1.5-hour drive to get that specialized support for the speech and language. So this now is the time, I guess, to be reaching out and finding what medical supports there are, how far you need to travel. I know in our area as well, there is not an Indigenous Friendship Center within, I mean, we need to drive about an 1.5 hours to get to the closest Indigenous Friendship Center. So that's something as well, when you're looking into transracial adoption, you really want to be on your game and finding out. And for those of you who are living in the Toronto area, I mean, you're going to have lots of support there, but we don't all have the privilege of being so close to amenities and support. So definitely look into that.
Thanks, Jen. And I think that's a valid point. Like we can't, like, I think there is always some of this Toronto-centric mindset, and we need to get that. We need to remove that and not assume everybody's in an urban situation where they can access programs. Yeah, easy with ease. Oh, Nicole just saying, great suggestion, Jen. Yeah, local resources, very valuable. Okay, I have another question about so there's an instance when a family submits their EOI, but they're not chosen, like there's not a match made, but later down the road, an adoption worker may find another profile that is a good match. So would the family be and the family is contacted. So does that happen? I know that I probably butchered that whole question, so if you need to reread it. And what is your advice, I guess, to family who are going through that? Again, that emotional, they have an interest, there isn't a match, but then, oh, hey, what about this?
Yeah, so I can speak to just, so it does happen sometimes that the adoption worker may, look at the profile and think there is another child that might be a good match, but it's not too often. But we do keep all of the expression of interest forms on file, and like as clinical coordinators, we will often look to those files. Like, so when we get a phone call about a child who is in need of permanency, oftentimes we'll look through past expression of interest forms to learn more about families, and then sometimes matches will happen that way. But I'm sure that could be, I know that families do, of course, see profiles and grow like very emotionally attached, of course. So I'm sure that can be, an emotional roller coaster. I'm not sure if you have anything to say about that, Jen, experiences.
Yeah, I did want to say also that from my experience, and a lot of parents I know who have adopted through matches at the ARE, it took several AREs before they really, they had that match. And so to always be keeping in mind, we're finding families for children, not the other way around, and not to take it personally. If you don't, you don't get a call back, if you're not the right family for that child, there's a reason, and it's not necessarily anything you can control. It could be simply your cultural background, where you live, your family makeup. And so to always be keeping in mind that this might take a few times, but it will be worth it to kind of make sure that we're finding the right match for this child, and not to be discouraged. I know in our case, we were discouraged the first 2 times or so when we went, and I think it was the 3rd time where we were matched with a few of our kids. So that's just something where I know it's hard, and especially when you've been waiting so long on your adoption journey, to feel like I'm gonna have to wait another 6 months or another year. That's really tough. But in the grand scheme of things, 20 years down the road, when you look back on your family, waiting that little bit longer for the right situation, the right match is the most important, really.
Yeah. And thanks for saying that, because, I think that could be great advice for waiting parents to hear too, because I think there is probably that initial reaction, like, well, what is it about me, right? And I think it's easy to go that, but it's a good reminder that it's in the best interest of the child and for their permanency, right? To be matched with the right family. I also have a follow-up question for you, Jenn, about that. Like, was there anything that you did self-care wise, like after attending multiple areas and not being matched? Was there something that helped you go through that? And what advice would you have in terms of self-care for awaiting families when they're when there's no match?
I would say my husband and I have very different ways of dealing with that disappointment. So for myself, I really needed to talk to somebody. So whether that was talking to our worker at CAS, talking to my family, and just talking through the process and how I was feeling, and that grief, because you do kind of grieve if you become attached to this idea of this child, which, by the way, is something interesting. When you become attached to a profile and a picture and a video, I will tell you, once you finally meet that child, it's not necessarily going to be what you're expecting or what you were thinking anyway. So that kind of initial feeling like this child, it might not be too accurate anyway. But my husband, his way of dealing things was to really remember things in his life that were important to him as well, so that his whole life isn't just about being a father or adopting, that he had other interests, baseball, getting together with his friends, things like that you can become so consumed with this goal of adoption that you forget that your life is more than that as well. And your interests can sometimes fall by the wayside. So yeah, if you're feeling just kind of that sense that everything's hanging on this decision, try to just take a step back and remember the bigger picture of your life if you can.
Thanks. And I know, like, we talk about self-care a lot on this program, and I know some people just the word, sometimes people get their back up, and I don't mean it that way. I just mean everyone's different, and it's not going to be the same for everybody. So I think the question, and maybe the advice, is like, just find whatever works for you.
Yeah, and I think also there were certain things for our family, self-care in the waiting, that once that child is placed with you, if the match goes forward, that you're not going to have time to do, and it's going to be probably a good year of real commitment to you. So we even found there were some things, we took a vacation with our daughters, because we knew we wouldn't be able to do that once we had that match. We just did little things as a family that were kind of like checking things off a list, because we knew we weren't going to have time for that once attachment was really going to be front of mind. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenn. So Vivian, we chatted a little bit about this before we went live, and I know you probably won't have like a specific answer, but everyone really wants to know what are the future plans? I mean, there will be future areas, but is there any talk of hybrid? Is there any talk of returning to in-person at some point? I know that you don't have a crystal ball, but you can share with us.
So nothing has been confirmed yet, but we are thinking that maybe there'd be some sort of combination of in-person and virtual. Obviously, virtual has been really great because like families have been able to attend from all over Ontario. You don't have to travel, but I'm sure everyone's missing that in-person aspect. So I think there might be some sort of hybrid. Yeah, but nothing's confirmed.
And you, Jen, I think you said that you only attended in person, yeah.
Yes. And I honestly, I hope they'll be able to go back to some sort of in-person, because there is nothing like making that connection with the child's worker and asking questions. And at the time we went, we also did, when we were talking about how some people were contacted about a child they didn't express interest in and matching. When we went, advice that was given to us was to go around and literally meet as many workers from whatever agency you can. And we had made up kind of a profile of our family, and we just gave it to like every worker we met. And a lot of them were grateful. Thank you. I'll put that in my pile. You might not be a match for a child I have here, but there might be somebody down the road or whatever. So it's just making those personal connections and forming relationships that's a little trickier with a virtual platform, I guess. So I hope that, we know we can't make plans, but I hope there's some sort of in-person in the future for sure.
Yes, it'd be great to be able to build those relationships in person for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I think most people feel that way, but I mean, I think we're kind of, I don't want to say caught, but we are in this in-between time where we don't have the insurances that you don't want to make all the plans to be in person and then have it canceled, right? So,
Exactly.
yeah. So we'll just keep crossing our fingers, right? I'm going to come back to this because I think it's really important. I know, Jen, you talked about some of the resources that Adopt for Life has for awaiting parents that they can sort of look into. So what advice would you have for awaiting parents that may be feeling discouraged? I know this, or frustrated, balancing having to advocate for themselves, so like reaching out to workers and putting themselves forward and out there, but also having to work with the system and trying to get a match. So you know what I'm trying to say? Like there's like a balance here.
And I think a lot of the issue from my perspective, when we were going through it, is a feeling of being alone in your struggle and feeling like, you're feeling that disappointment, and you're feeling like you're hearing of all of these different people who have adopted and why isn't it working out for you? So this feeling of being alone. One thing I did want to mention is Adopt for Life has a Facebook group that's all for awaiting and beginning. And so normally with Adopt for Life, there are other Facebook groups you don't really gain access until you have an adoptive placement. But this is a Facebook group specifically for parents who are awaiting or beginning their journey. And I think it's really important to be able to tell your story and to talk to other people and say, yeah, gee, like I feel like I'm advocating for myself, but I don't feel like my worker's getting back to me. I don't feel like I'm being heard. It's really nice to kind of bounce those thoughts off of other people. And sometimes you get really good advice in that process and people who have been there and gone through it. And definitely something to keep in mind is I honestly, I had a worker with our CAS tell me this along our journey, and saying to always remember that it's not you, it's not about you. So going through all of this, to always remembering. So yeah, you don't want to take things personally, but it really isn't that workers are out there trying to match a child and looking at you and thinking, oh no, not this family. That is not happening. It's not about you. It really is about this child. And to get counseling if you need it, get hooked up with somebody where you can be kind of building up your own sense of self so that you are strong and secure enough to handle that, what can feel like rejection in the process. So yeah, sometimes it really is. Sometimes you need pre-adoption counseling, and that's okay to admit that that's what you need and to get the help you need. So
Amazing, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears and go back a bit and talk about or ask a question about the ARE. So your team, Vivian, put together, as they do every year, like this amazing, rich resources, like you talked about, the webinars that are, they're in the process of being, like they've been recorded and they're just in the transition process of being put on that platform for people to access. So, and I think you did mention, but maybe just for possibly people that are tuning in, what are some what would you call must see on that ARE platform for awaiting families to learn from?
Yeah. So yeah, it's just, again, so the online platform will be available until May 30th. And some of the highlights for sure were there was an openness panel that was really wonderful. And then as well, there was in the last couple of days, there's been, so currently those videos from the weekend are not yet uploaded, so they will be in the upcoming days. But in the meantime, there's some fantastic panels from the previous ARE, and they're all really wonderful. As I said, there was one that I was just watching again for a second time about FASD that was really interesting. And there's another amazing panel, and it's all folks who are transracially adopted, and I really recommend that you check that out. They're all speaking to their experiences, and you should, if you have the time, definitely check it out.
I think that's important too, and I think Jenny mentioned it too. Like, if any time there's an opportunity for any parent, but awaiting parents, to seek out voices of adult adoptees, and I think that provides such a rich resource.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's not a question that I have lined up, but I thought, and it's open to both of you, because I know at this area, but correct me if I'm wrong, that there was sort of more, we wanted to offer more resources and education to awaiting families about adopting older youth. And so Jen, maybe you want to start, because I know you have the experience of doing that. And what advice would you share, or what misconceptions would you want to eradicate?
Oh, well, that is a question. So
in a couple minutes, wrap it up.
Yes, one of our children who we adopted was close to 10 years old when we adopted, part of a sibling group with younger siblings as well. And what I would say is that I was not prepared enough for how much early trauma was going to have an impact, and how unprepared I was to deal with developmental trauma disorder, attachment disorder. There are several things in there that I just, and to be honest, I think that that's something where you need to ask a lot of questions to the sending agency, and be brutally honest about how you're feeling or questions you have, because I think a lot of times too, like, a worker really has a vested interest in these children. They want to see older children adopted. And so sometimes certain issues may not be discussed or disclosed as fully as they should be. Unfortunately, I'd like to think that they always are, and everything's always out there on the table, but that doesn't always happen. So definitely ask lots of questions and prepare yourself if you are adopting an older child for the impacts of trauma. And that may not, there is kind of a honeymoon period when children are placed with you. So it may not come out at the very beginning. It may be something you deal with 5 years down the road. But parents do need to know, children aren't a blank slate when they come to you. They have a history, and even more so when they're much older, when they come to you. If they've had a lot of disrupted placements, if they've bounced through foster care home after home after home, there's going to be a lot you're going to be having to deal with. And I know that the thought was often there when we were looking to adopt, and we're open to older children, that it was a lot of times, you know, I had it said a few times, they're just looking for somewhere that they can go to do laundry when they're in college or go for Christmas dinner. And so that's kind of the thought you have in your mind. Oh yeah, it's just this teenager who needs a place to call home. There really is so much more to it than that. There's a lot there that you need to be prepared for as a family, to support them. And I'm not saying you should not pursue older children, as an adoptive placement, because absolutely, these older children and teenagers need a home, but they need a home that is well equipped to help them the way they need to be helped. So I don't know. I hope that doesn't scare anybody away, but that's my honest. Those are my honest thoughts.
There's also there was a great panel conversation this past ARE, and it should be posted soon. And it was 3 adoptive parents who adopted older youth, and they talked about some of the misconceptions, and they all spoke to how meaningful their relationships were and how they just look very different than what they expected. And a lot of it was, a lot of self-reflection on that the adoptive parents spoke to in terms of like building that relationship. It really took, really looking within and seeing what their own triggers were. It was really interesting conversation. So worthwhile watching as well.
Okay, so if you're listening, then, there's Vivian telling us that soon on the ARE platform, there will be a panel that discusses from adoptive parent experience adopting older youth. That is very worthwhile to watch. So keep back into that platform, and I'm sure it just gets updated.
So it was this past weekend. It just takes them some hours to bring that recording onto the platform.
Okay, I have another live question. I think this is a very popular topic. Somebody wants to know, okay, so we talked about the rejection that awaiting parents may go through when not selected. Could we talk about what parents can do when they themselves decide, they make the decision, okay, I'm not going to move forward because it's not the right fit? Will those parents be viewed differently by the CAS workers, or will those parents feel sort of caught, right? And it can be very emotional. Would either of you have any advice in that particular situation?
I know from personal experience, we did say no a few times before we were matched with our kids. So I don't think it had a negative, I don't think it flagged us as being, contrarian or anything like that. Yeah. I think it was just honestly, they understood our reasons. I think it's good to be clear on your reasons as well. It's not that you're not committed to adoption. It's not that you're not really interested, but that these were the reasons why you couldn't pursue this. And sometimes that may happen a little bit into the journey, even where you find out more and more about the child that you weren't disclosed at the beginning. And don't feel pressured at that point to continue the process if you really are feeling in your gut a feeling. I know we can't always go by that gut feeling, but if you really are feeling a lot of misgivings, it's okay if you've gone quite a bit further into the process to put the brakes on. Better that than 3 years into adoption, things break down. So don't be afraid. I don't think you're going to be put on the naughty list for saying no.
Yeah. Anything you want to add to that, Vivian? Or
I think it's it definitely does happen for sure. And I think if anything, it's really great that families have that self-awareness and understand, what their openness is to different needs. And that's much better than like I think, as Jenn said, to listen to yourself, it's a really good idea.
Yeah. Often if you're having a gut reaction, you should probably listen to it. Right? So we're going to wrap up because we're top of the hour. So before we say goodbye, I know we listed a ton of resources. I'm going to post as many of the links as I remember. But if there's any last piece of advice or resource or anything that you want to mention before we say goodbye, I'm going to just pass it over. Vivian, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah. I just want to, of course, wish everyone the best on their adoption journeys. And then as well, I wanted to mention through the Adoption Council of Ontario, we have a program called Pathways for families who have begun their permanency journey. It's a really great program, a really great opportunity to build kind of community with individuals who are going through the exact same kind of process. So I definitely recommend that.
Okay. Any last message from you, Jenn?
Yeah, I guess this isn't necessarily a resource. I gave a lot of those already, but I think for anyone who's gone through this weekend to just keep the top of your mind that this is a journey, and I truly believe everything happens for a reason. So if it doesn't work out this time, there was a reason for it. I know our youngest son, who was a kinship adoption for a couple years, we went to the ARE because we had this feeling like our family was not complete yet, and we kept pursuing and nothing ever worked out, and I always was disappointed and wondered why. And now that we have our youngest son, I just can't even imagine my life without him. And if we had adopted before him, in those years, he wouldn't have come to stay. So things happen for a reason. Keep that in mind. It will work out. And good luck, everyone.
Thank you both so much. It was really appreciated. Jenn, for your personal lived experience was really appreciated, and all the information that you brought towards from the Adopt Ontario, Vivian. If anybody's watching this on a replay and you still have a question, please put it in the chat. And we'll just make sure that, we'll contact you in another way to make sure that your questions are answered the best that we can. If you're still watching, thank you. Please join us next week. Next week, we're celebrating Adopt for Life's 8th anniversary. So we're going to have some special guests joining us, our executive director, a bunch of people that have been with Adopt for Life for many years, and we're going to celebrate a well-deserved anniversary. So until then, take care of yourselves, and bye for now. Thanks, everyone.